Gateway to the World, B2 Plus Workbook by Kate Pickering. Unit 1. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. Life in Isolation.
Have you ever had one of those days when everyone is getting on your nerves and all you want to do is be by yourself? Most of us feel like this sometimes, but how long do you think you could really survive alone before wishing you were back with your friends and family, despite their irritating habits?
A.
By nature, humans are social animals. We live in groups, and we spend a lot of time simply talking without any real purpose. We like doing things together and giving each other a hand. So being alone is something many people struggle with. This has never been more evident than during the recent coronavirus pandemic in countries where a lockdown was introduced. Despite being able to communicate online, many people found that social isolation was one of the hardest things to deal with. Experts say this may have long-term effects on the way we interact with others, though these effects are likely to be unique to individuals rather than necessarily affecting the whole of society in the same way. While some people benefited from the opportunity to refocus aspects of their lives while alone, according to research by Vox.com, one thing many people vowed to change after the pandemic was to stay more in touch with family and friends.
B.
Some people choose isolation, or rather, their occupation requires them to live away from society and civilization for long periods at a time. When it comes to selecting the right people to work in remote environments, like the polar regions or space, great care needs to be taken to ensure that those chosen will be able to deal with spending long periods of time far away from their loved ones. Whether living alone or sharing a very restricted space with unfamiliar colleagues, isolation in these faraway places can be hard going. The unique environment of the International Space Station is especially challenging for the 6 astronauts on board, and it's important that team members are socially compatible. Among the psychological qualities which NASA looks for in its astronauts are a capacity for teamwork, self-control, and a calm disposition to deal with serious technical problems that could arise far from Earth. Scientists who have spent time in remote environments recommend taking up a hobby, being tolerant of your colleagues, and also making an effort to keep in touch with people from the outside world, though obviously that isn't always possible.
C.
For some people, social isolation takes place in far less impressive and beautiful surroundings than outer space. According to solitarywatch.org, anywhere between 60,000 and 100,000 prisoners in the US are currently living in restricted housing, which can sometimes mean living in solitary confinement or being alone in their cell for over 22 hours per day. In some cases, this lasts for only a few days. But there are other prisoners who live in a small space without human contact for many years. This has a significant effect on both their mental and physical well-being, with around a third of prisoners showing symptoms of serious psychological problems, according to US Bureau of Justice statistics. The impact of solitary confinement on prisoners' mental health includes an increase in anxiety and stress, difficulty concentrating, and an increased level of anger. But prisoners also experience physical symptoms such as headaches, problems with eyesight, vitamin D deficiency, and an increased sensitivity to light and noise.
D.
By its very nature, crossing the oceans alone is a solitary business. Solo sailors and rowers live for weeks in limited space, often with little sleep. Moreover, they have to face potentially life-threatening situations, such as technical problems, extreme weather conditions or illness, unaided and alone. So, how do they cope with the social isolation their sport brings? Anxiety could become a big problem in this type of situation, but solo sailor Dee Kafari, says there is little point worrying about things which are outside your control. Instead, she stresses the need to have a routine to give purpose, structure, and a sense of achievement to each day. She also highlights the importance of using technology to keep in touch, something which she also recommends for people separated from their friends and family as a result of the pandemic.
Unit 1. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 4 and 5.
Welcome to today's podcast, which is all about food and relationships. Now, we all know food's importance. It provides us with energy, helps our body to function, grow and repair itself, keeps us warm, and even influences our mood and mental health. But what influence does food have on our relationships and how we behave towards each other? That's what I'm going to be discussing with my guest this morning, writer and cultural behaviourist Marga O'Donnell. Marga, good morning.
Good morning, Henry.
As I said in my introduction there, food is an important part of our everyday lives. But it's so much more than just an energy source that fuels our bodies, isn't it? In fact, in a recent article, you described food as a cultural object. What exactly did you mean by that?
Well, what we eat is very much a reflection of the society we live in. In fact, I believe that food and the culture around eating can be just as important to cultural identity as, say, a country's music or art. Our diet and how and when we eat says a lot about the history, geography, and climate of our country.
Okay, I can see how geography and climate might influence what we eat. What's the connection between these factors and how and when we eat? Could you expand on that for us a little?
Well, for example, in southern Europe, people often eat later in the day compared to the north. In Norway, for instance, dinner can be as early as 4 p.m., whereas in Italy, the average dinner time is around 9 p.m. Reasons for this are largely to do with climate and the hours of sunlight in certain countries, with generally hotter, longer days in southern Europe, meaning people have later meal times. Spain, of course, is well known for its late dinner time. This may also partly be due to the fact that Spain sits in the Central European time zone, when in fact, geographically, it is situated in Greenwich Mean Time, the same time zone as the UK and Portugal. This means that, strictly speaking, Spain is 1 hour ahead of its actual time zone.
I see. So these factors can influence when people eat. So how can food and meal times affect our relationships? I suppose it's the social aspect of eating together, isn't it?
Yes. If you think about it, eating food together is central to many of our human interactions. Indeed, the word companion comes from the Latin word for bread and literally means someone you share bread with. We go out and meet our friends in cafes or restaurants, and we celebrate special occasions with a meal. Food brings us together and gives us a foundation around which to build our interactions with friends and family. A lot of research in recent years has focused on the connection between eating together and successful relationships. And interestingly, some evidence suggests that families who don't regularly eat together are more likely to communicate less effectively than those who do.
That is interesting. Now, I wanted to focus in on the significance of the act of eating the same food together. In your article, you touch on the subject of communal eating and sharing food from the same dishes, and how this helps to form relationships. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. In many cultures, for example in countries like India and China, it's very common to share food from a communal serving dish. People see it as a way of being close and showing friendship. And this became the subject of a research project at Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago.
A business school?
Yes, that's right. Their research centered on the effects of sharing food on business relationships. They did some experiments to see how successful people were at negotiating and reaching agreement. They had two different groups of participants. One group was sharing the same food from the same dishes while they talked, and the other ordered their own separate dishes.
And what did they find out?
The people who shared food were more likely to work better together. But more interestingly still, they took 30% less time to reach an agreement than the group with separate dishes.
Fascinating. So it seems that sharing food can help to improve relationships and bring people together. OK, now something else I wanted to ask you was...
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 3.
That's an interesting question. In one way, it all sounds like science fiction. But as a matter of fact, there are already a lot of them doing jobs in places like factories. I saw a documentary about old people's homes in Japan, and they have them looking after elderly people. Personally, I don't like that idea too much. But I think it is clear that in, say, 50 years' time, most of us will have one doing basic jobs at home, and I reckon we'll probably think it's quite normal.
Let me think about that for a second. OK, I guess it would be my dad. We've both got black hair and green eyes, and we have similar personalities. We're both optimistic, and we've both got a good sense of humour, I think. Apart from that, we both like going fishing and being outdoors. We also hate getting up early. Yep, definitely my dad.
As far as I'm concerned, it's definitely better when I'm with a friend. The thing is, I get distracted really easily. For instance, I'll start looking at stuff on my phone, and before I know it, half an hour's just gone. My friend Sherry often comes round if we've got an exam or something. At first, my mum was worried we'd spend the whole time talking. But in fact, she could see that I was working much better when Sherry was there than when she wasn't. And it's also more fun.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5.
As far as I'm concerned, the best place is outside. The thing is, I'm really into team sports like hockey and cricket, and, in fact, I spend a lot of time in the open air, training and playing matches. But apart from that, we all spend too much time indoors anyway. To my mind, if I'm in class all morning, the last thing I want to do after that is to sit in front of a screen all afternoon. I reckon it's much healthier for us to spend our free time in a completely different environment.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6.
As far as I'm concerned, the best place is outside.
Unit 1. Developing Speaking. Exercise 7. 1.
To my mind,
2.
as a matter of fact,
3.
for instance,
4.
apart from that.
5.
That's an interesting question.
6.
Let me think about that for a second.
Unit 2. Vocabulary in context and reading. Exercise 5. Driving on the school curriculum.
Are you eager to get behind the steering wheel? If so, you're not alone. Many young people today are keen to learn to drive. On the one hand, they see driving as a way to gain greater autonomy and reduce dependence on their parents. On the other hand, they are also highly aware that driving is a very important skill in today's world. Being able to drive is as necessary as being able to use a computer or speak another language. In fact, in a survey of more than 17,000 young motorists conducted by motoring association the AA, 15% of those who replied thought that driving was the most valuable life experience, ranking higher than either marriage or having a university degree. Aside from increased independence, one of the main arguments in favour of learning to drive young is that young people need to be able to drive for the world of work. Since many young people want to find employment as soon as they leave school, having the right skills in place when they do so is vital. Some people feel that an inability to drive could close avenues of opportunity and adversely affect their chances of getting a job offer. And indeed, a recent study by the Royal Automobile Club shows this to be true. Of over 800,000 jobs in the UK, 15% of vacancies for jobs as diverse as chef, security guard and electrician listed having a driving licence as a requirement. Many of those who struggle to pass their driving test later in life think they ought to have taken driving lessons when they were younger. Statistically, the older you get, the harder it is to get your driving licence. In the UK, the pass rate for 17-year-olds is around 55%, according to passmefast.co.uk. But this drops as your age increases. As we get older, we don't learn as quickly, and our eyesight, hearing and reflexes all get worse. In contrast, early contact with cars and driving is thought to make children and teens better informed about road safety and more likely to become confident drivers when they reach the legal driving age. It's no surprise, then, that in a survey carried out by Young Driver, the UK's largest provider of driving lessons for under-17s, 44% of respondents thought that driving should be taught in school. A few years ago, various motoring organisations in the UK tried to get the government to put driving on the school curriculum, and a lot of people take the view that schools should place just as much emphasis on practical life skills like driving, cookery and money management as they do on more traditional academic subjects. They feel that these subjects would better prepare school leavers for the real challenges of life. Some people even argue that learning to drive would be considerably more useful than other subjects currently on young people's timetables. While history and maths have their place, so too do parking and reversing. In Britain, driving has never been an official school subject, but in the USA, things are a bit different. Driver's education, or driver's ed classes, first started in the 1920s. And by the 1940s, the first driving simulators were seen in American schools. Learning to drive was a popular subject right through the 60s and 70s, and many students passed their test thanks to high school classes. During the 1980s and 90s, however, many school districts began eliminating driver's ed classes because of doubts about their effectiveness and the inevitably high costs involved. School districts in some states do continue to offer tuition in schools, but nowadays a lot more of this has to take place online due to cost. But perhaps the most important reason for teaching young people to drive is safety. Every year, 400 people are killed in the UK in collisions involving young drivers, according to academytoday.co.uk. Moreover, 20% of young drivers have an accident in the first 12 months after passing their test, according to gap insurance broker ALA. In an independent study, Young Driver, the UK company which offers driving lessons to children as young as 11, found that when its pupils reached the legal driving age and qualified as new drivers, they were half as likely to have an accident. Whether your motivation is teenage independence, having an advantage when looking for work, or dramatically cutting back the number of road accidents, there seems to be little doubt that driving lessons could be a great addition to the typical school timetable.
Unit 2. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 4 and 5.
We continue our series of interviews with people about their jobs. In today's programme, we'll be talking to Francesca Cooper, better known as Frankie. Now, you're not a mountain climber or an astronaut, but you do have what's often been described as one of the most dangerous jobs in the world, a driving instructor.
Well, I don't do a really dangerous job like being a firefighter, but I suppose I do put my life on the line every day when I get into my car to do my job.
There can't be too many people who want to risk getting into a car with someone who's never driven before.
I love it, in spite of the risks. But sometimes I think it would be easier to be an astronaut or a firefighter.
How long have you been doing your job?
Believe it or not, I started in the business just over 30 years ago. In fact, it's coming up for 32 years now. I was just 23 when I started.
That's a long time. Has your job changed much over the years?
Well, some things are the same. It's still hard to learn to drive. That hasn't changed. You have to master the physical controls of the vehicle, and then there are the different behavioural responses you need to develop too.
Such as?
Making split-second decisions, like slowing down when you see someone is about to cross the road, or knowing instinctively when a car is going to pull out in front of you. That's all part of it. But with the increase in traffic, learning to drive is a whole new ballgame these days.
Yes, it must be much more difficult to learn to drive on today's roads.
Absolutely. The number of cars and the constant road repairs can cause road conditions that can try the patience of the most even-tempered drivers. And some inevitably get angry and take unnecessary risks that make driving unsafe for others.
Yes, what about road rage? Do you think that's a big problem?
Definitely. Most people are very considerate of learner drivers, as they can still remember what it was like learning to drive. So they're patient if a learner driver goes more slowly or is a bit hesitant. But I remember once I was giving a young driver his first lesson and he stalled the car in the middle of a busy road junction. He started the engine again quite quickly, but by that time the traffic lights had changed. A driver coming in the opposite direction couldn't turn right. Instead of waiting, he got out of his car and started shouting, and he even banged on the roof of the car.
That must have been very frightening.
It was. He kept shouting about how he had to get to hospital to see his wife. But it was scary. Driving can definitely bring out the worst in some people.
He was probably a nice, calm person normally. Being worried could well have been the reason he behaved like that, but he shouldn't have done it.
You're right. And part of my job now is helping people cope with the problems they may face with other road users. Luckily, that learner wasn't put off driving completely and went on to take his test a few months later. But some people might never have got behind the wheel again.
What about in-car distractions?
Getting people to understand the dangers of using phones, even hands-free devices, is one of the trickiest parts of my job. People don't realise how dangerous they can be. A distraction, even a small one, can cause an accident. Anything that takes your concentration off the road is a potential danger. Even things like listening to music, talking to people, or eating and drinking. Some people want to ban drivers eating in cars, but I think it's fine to eat a banana or a chocolate bar, especially if you're driving long distances.
So, even with all the difficulties, you still love your job.
Oh, yes. It may be hard, but it's a secure job. People will always need driving instructors, and I enjoy the challenges, and I certainly never get bored. That might be the best reason for doing this job.
Unit 2. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
OK. Both photographs show situations in which car owners are experiencing difficulties. However, one significant difference between the two photos is where the drivers are. In the first photograph, we can see a woman in a car in what looks like a busy car park, probably in an urban area. It might be at a supermarket or shopping centre, whereas the second photo seems to be in a rural setting. There don't seem to be any other people around. To my mind, the first photo shows us a day-to-day frustration for many car owners in the city, which is trying to find a parking space. It's really nothing out of the ordinary and quite a normal thing for drivers to have to do, but it's quite possible to spend hours driving round looking for a place to park. And this is one reason I don't have a car. The second photo shows us a situation which is not as common as the first. I think the car must have broken down, and I imagine the driver is calling a mechanic or maybe his insurance company to send someone to repair the car or take it to a garage to fix it. In terms of how the people in the photos might be feeling, I imagine both people must be feeling quite frustrated. In the first photo, the driver might have spent some time looking for a free place, and in the second, I guess the driver is on his way somewhere and is now likely to be quite late, as he could be waiting some time for help to arrive.
Unit 2. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1.
The teacher must have been ill.
2.
You should have called me.
3.
They may have forgotten.
4.
She shouldn't have told them.
5.
They might not have seen you.
6.
You can't have forgotten your phone.
Unit 3. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. Amazing Brains.
Which part of the human body weighs about 1.4 kilograms, needs 20% of the oxygen in our bodies to function, and can process information at a speed of over 400 kilometres per hour? It is, of course, the brain, which has enabled us to invent the wheel, build the pyramids, and land on the moon. It's clear that we humans have developed a remarkable set of skills and a unique gift for making the most of the environment we live in. But is our brain really so unique? Does it stand out from other brains in the animal world as being bigger, faster, or more efficient? Not necessarily. For example, Scientists have discovered that the world's smallest monkey actually devotes the same amount of its body's energy to the brain as we do. Nor is it simply a question of size. We would be wrong to assume that the animals with the biggest brains are necessarily the most intelligent. If this was the case, then whales and elephants would be the geniuses of the world. Yet, many small animals also learn to perform complicated and sophisticated tasks, either alone or working together to achieve the goals of the group. It seems that the matter is a more complex question than you might think. One of the most common ways that we gauge an animal's intelligence is by looking at the brain-to-body mass ratio, which means the relationship between the size of the animal and its brain. The higher the percentage of the body the brain occupies, the more intelligent the animal, so the theory goes. At first sight, this seems a useful guide to ascertaining intelligence. A human, in common with the dolphin and the octopus, has a relatively high brain-to-body mass ratio. Our brains are large compared to our body size, and all three animals can grasp complex information and show higher levels of intelligence. However, the brain-to-body mass ratio does not take all relevant factors into account. There is a big difference in brain size between cold-blooded and warm-blooded animals, for example, with warm-blooded species having relatively larger brains in proportion to body size. Additionally, some sea-living mammals need to have a higher proportion of fat in their bodies to protect them from the cold, and this affects the body-to-brain mass ratio. Moreover, you might think that the brain would increase or decrease in direct proportion to the size of the animal, and that the bigger the animal, the bigger the brain, and vice versa. But you would be wrong. Interestingly, as the size of an animal gets smaller, its brain often becomes relatively bigger. The human brain, for example, only accounts for 2 to 3% of our body mass, but in some ants, the brain is about 15% of their total mass. If you're starting to feel a little fazed by all of this, then prepare yourself. The world of animal brains is rich and varied. Take the giant squid, for example. Its brain is shaped like a donut, a ring with a hole in the middle connecting the squid's two large eyes. And in turn, the digestive system of the squid goes through the hole in the ring and actually passes through the middle of its brain. Of course, this means that having a big meal is not without risks if you're a squid, as the food could put pressure on the brain and even damage it. Some other creatures' brains are only useful on a temporary basis, and there's really no point wasting energy on them after they have served their purpose. The young sea squirt uses its brain while looking for a suitable place on the seabed to spend its adult life. Once it has found a home, however, it has no further use for its brain and absorbs it, using the material to develop its still essential stomach. And if you're looking for a brain to rival that of the human in terms of interest, then look no further than the spider. Spiders are among the most remarkable animals. They manage to carry out a whole range of highly sophisticated activities, from the intricate engineering involved in building a web to hunting. But they also have the most amazing brain. In fact, the brain of our eight-legged friends is so large that in some species it accounts for up to 80% of the animal's body. This makes it so big that there isn't enough space for it in the spider's head, and it has to occupy other parts of the body, including the legs. So, next time you think that it's humans who have the most incredible brain in the natural world, maybe you should use your amazing brain to think again.
Unit 3. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercise 4. Speaker 1.
I've been working with elderly people for a number of years, and for me, there's one thing that stands out in terms of keeping people young, and that's using your brain and keeping it active. As the saying goes, use it or lose it. Over the years since I've been caring for people here, I've seen that people who challenge themselves to learn something new, like learning a language, or those who carry on with a hobby, like continuing to play a musical instrument, definitely age more slowly. But it doesn't need to be something complicated. Any kind of mental activity can help people to stay young. I often encourage our residents to do puzzles to keep the brain active. One woman who used to live here in the home did the crossword in the newspaper every day. She would describe it as her mental workout. And that woman lived to the age of 99 and was in great shape mentally.
Speaker 2.
Here in the lab, my colleagues and I have been doing research into different factors that affect the way people age and what you can do to protect your brain. And our experiments have shown that while there are many things that help keep your brain young, such as improving what you eat, reducing the amount of sugar and so on, one of the things that people often don't realise is that being physically active is as important for the health of your brain as, say, getting 8 hours of sleep a night. Our research has shown that regular exercise increases the flow of blood in the brain and can actually encourage the growth of new nerve cells, all of which keeps your brain young.
Speaker 3.
Over the years, it's become evident that certain sports involve a high level of physical activity and also carry a serious risk of impact, which can have a very damaging effect on the brain. Rugby, American football and boxing are all associated with this type of risk. People are starting to recognise that there are higher levels of age-related brain problems, such as conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia, among people who used to take part in these sports. Here in the gym, we teach our fighters about the importance of protective headwear and warn them not to fight without it. For me, it's every bit as important as knowing how to attack or defend yourself in the ring. In the past, people weren't aware of just how necessary this is. I'm teaching people a sport which I love and which I hope they will continue to do throughout their lives. But I also want to teach them how to avoid serious injury.
Speaker 4.
I see many different types of patients in my professional life, so I've had plenty of opportunities to reach conclusions about the best way to keep the brain young. From my point of view, our feelings are of vital importance. A lot of people today live in a constant state of stress and continually feel under pressure to achieve. They don't allow enough time to just let their mind wander or look after their emotional well-being, and, over the years, this can lead to serious problems. I advise everyone I see to take time to look after themselves, and obviously I don't just mean their physical health. Mindfulness has become very popular in recent years, but any type of meditation will do. In fact, anything that gives us a chance to calm down and connect with our breathing and notice how we're feeling will have a positive effect.
Speaker 5.
Now, obviously, you may think I'm biased because of what I do, but I'm absolutely convinced that it has a totally positive effect on the brain. Every time we get together and open our mouths to sing, something magical happens, something very powerful. There's a connection and a type of communication between us on an emotional level that is really unique. The link between musical ability and the ability to grasp maths has long been known. I guess they're both alternative languages in a way. But a friend of mine from the choir who works as a nurse is convinced that not only may music be an excellent alternative to taking lots of pills and medicine, but it can also help keep us and our brains young. It's always good to learn something new, And in my view, you're never too old to consider taking up an instrument or joining a choir.
Unit 3. Developing Speaking. Exercise 2.
I'd like to begin by saying that, as well as teaching us facts and figures, I firmly believe that schools should be teaching us useful life skills. One of the most important of these, in my view, is the ability to speak in public. Firstly, it's clear that public speaking is a skill most of us will need at some time. Giving presentations is something we often have to do at schools and at university. What's more, in our adult lives, many of us will have to speak in public, whether we're presenting information at a business meeting or explaining scientific research at a conference. Some people might argue that public speaking is something that anyone can do without needing special training. Whilst it's true that classroom time needs to be used in the most effective way, that doesn't alter my opinion that working on public speaking is a worthwhile activity. You only have to look at someone blocking the screen when giving a presentation or reading aloud long passages of text from slides to realise that this is a skill which needs to be taught. Furthermore, learning how to put together a clear and attractive visual presentation is a skill in itself. You need to get the right amount of text and remember the importance of images, which are often more effective than words. This is not necessarily something people will do naturally. Let's not forget that not everyone finds it easy to be in the spotlight. There's no denying that some students will struggle to communicate well or to keep eye contact with the audience. Providing an opportunity to focus on technique is sure to improve the performance of even the most reluctant speaker. To sum up, public speaking is an essential part of the world of work and study today, so schools have a responsibility to help students develop their abilities in this area. In my view, the classroom is the ideal place to do this.
Unit 3. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4.
Firstly, it's clear that public speaking is a skill most of us will need at some time.
Unit 3. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
What's more, in our adult lives, many of us will have to speak in public.
2.
That doesn't alter my opinion that working on public speaking is a worthwhile activity.
3.
Let's not forget that not everyone finds it easy to be in the spotlight.
4.
There's no denying that some students will struggle to keep eye contact with the audience.
Unit 4. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 6. The Science of Running.
Christopher McDougall is an American author who trained as a journalist and later worked as a foreign correspondent, covering wars in both Rwanda and Angola. He has since written magazine articles and regular newspaper features. But Christopher McDougall is also a runner, and it is his fascination with running that led him to the subject of his 3 best-selling books. Like many long-distance runners, McDougall used to suffer regular injuries. He bought the best possible running shoes and followed all the usual advice, but the pain continued. Looking to see if he could find other solutions, he started to do research and came across the Tarahumara Indians. These indigenous people from the remote Copper Canyons in Mexico have been living a life which has been virtually unchanged for the past 400 years. They are also expert long-distance runners. It's not unusual to see 70-year-old Tarahumaras running distances of 150 kilometres. And, more importantly, modern-day running injuries are unknown to them. McDougall became fascinated and wanted to find out the secret to their abilities and why they were so different from runners in the developed world. He started to write a book, which was subsequently published under the title Born to Run in 2009. On one level, it talks about his relationship with the Tarahumara people and a race he organises between Tarahumara runners and elite ultramarathon runners. At the same time, he provides a lot of fascinating information about the biomechanics of running. One particularly interesting section concerns the development of shoes. McDougall asserts that far from being the sophisticated result of years of engineering research, it is in fact modern trainers which cause so many typical runners' injuries. Noting that the Tarahumara run in very basic cloth sandals, he joins the increasing numbers of athletes who have taken to running barefoot or with the simplest running shoe. McDougall's research also led him to identify other interesting principles about running. These include the fact that women and older people can run just as fast as younger men, providing that the distance is long enough. He quotes the example of ultra-runner Emily Bear, who came 8th in a 160-kilometre ultra race despite stopping every few hours to feed her newborn baby. In his second book, Natural Born Heroes, McDougall tells the amazing story of runners who worked for the resistance movement on the Greek island of Crete during the Second World War. The athletes would run for hours, covering distances of up to 80 kilometres through the mountainous terrain of Crete to carry messages to help Allied troops during the occupation of the island. Again, McDougall turned his attention to the science behind the story. This time he discovered that one of the reasons behind their extraordinary running ability was their diet. The traditional diet of Crete is rich in green vegetables, including many which grow in the wild. These provide high levels of vitamins and antioxidants. The people also stored and used their body's energy in a special way. Another thing he discovered was that the Cretan runners also used their fascia, the tissue that covers the muscles, to give their bodies explosive power. In the book, McDougall studies how modern-day sports like parkour employ similar principles of biomechanics. In his third book, McDougall tells the story of Sherman, a badly neglected donkey whom McDougall and his family rescue and adopt. With the help of friends and neighbours, Sherman recovers from his injuries. Later, McDougall uses running as part of the animal's rehabilitation program. The ultimate goal was to take part in the World Championship Pack Burro race in Colorado. In this race, humans run alongside donkeys over a 24 or 48-kilometre course through mountains. Sherman and McDougall competed along with around 90 donkeys and their human companions. Through training for the race, McDougall became more aware of the biological connection between humans and animals. One of the best things about McDougall's writing is the way he can integrate a fascinating story with all kinds of interesting facts about the scientific principles underpinning aspects of modern life. If you're interested in reading a book which is both informative and a good read, you're sure to enjoy Christopher McDougall's writing.
Unit 4. Developing Vocabulary and Listening. Exercises 3, 4 and 5.
Good afternoon and welcome to Education Today. Now, for most students today, Science and technology subjects make up a major part of their school week. Some people love this, others hate it, but at least you have the opportunity to decide. What if you were one of the many students who are desperate to have the chance to study science but face all kinds of challenges and obstacles when they try to do so? I'm talking about students with visual impairment. I'm joined in the studio today by education expert Nicola Baxter. Nicola, good morning.
Good morning, Sandy. Lovely to be here.
Nicola, first of all, can you tell me what we mean by the term visually impaired?
Of course. So, nowadays we normally describe people who have some type of problem with seeing as being visually impaired or a person with a visual impairment. This could, in reality, be anything from being completely blind, unable to see anything at all, through to people with low vision, who can maybe make out light or colour, but can't read street signs or recognise faces.
OK. Now, we're talking today about studying science. Is that a particular problem for people with a visual impairment?
It certainly is, at least in the majority of schools and countries around the world. Although the outlook is improving, there are still a lot of problems when it comes to an inclusive education, one in which children with a disability are integrated and have the same opportunities as others. But the situation is far worse when it comes to science.
Why is that?
Well, there are a number of barriers. Many schools lack the facilities to convert visual information into an appropriate format for...
Sorry, if I could just interrupt you a moment there. What type of formats do you mean?
Well, depending on how extreme the impairment is, the student might need to access information using text in large print or Braille, the special tactile language for blind people. Or nowadays, possibly an audio format.
Right. So I can understand that many schools wouldn't have the resources to do that.
Absolutely. Another issue is that science teaching is often based on observation, a teacher demonstrating an experiment, for example. Visually impaired students also need to use other senses, such as touch and hearing, in practical science experiments.
And I imagine that a laboratory is not necessarily a safe place for a blind student.
Yes, that's true. Practical experiments can involve naked flames and the use of chemicals or other volatile materials, so visually impaired students need extra support. But the real problem concerns teachers. One major drawback is that teachers sometimes lack the necessary training and support to adapt science lessons for students with a visual impairment.
Are there other problems?
Yes, unfortunately. There are also some teachers who feel unable to prioritise making these changes because they already have a lot of other things to think about.
Right. So I can understand how that could be very frustrating for students who are keen to study science but unable to do so. Is there any good news here?
Indeed, there is. There are some amazing schools out there which have been working for years to enable visually impaired students to get the same opportunities as other students. Places like Perkins School in Massachusetts. Its first director, Samuel Gridley Howe, was aware of the importance of adapting science education for blind students. He even created a museum at the school to allow the students to touch animals, minerals and models of the solar system. And that was back in 1839.
My goodness.
Students at Perkins were doing practical experiments in laboratories from the early 1900s. And if we move forward to the present day, students at Perkins are currently working on a project called Soundscape Ecology, where they're studying the impact that human-generated noises have on the natural world and how animals change their communication as a result.
Fascinating stuff.
It certainly is. And it shows you what can be possible with good training and the desire to give all students the same opportunities. But unless you have the chance to go to one of these amazing schools, like Perkins, this will be something you just dream of. Even for exceptional students like Kartik Sahni.
Kartik Sahni? Who's that?
Kartik is a student from India. He always loved science and was really hard-working at school. He even scored 95% in his final exams.
He sounds like a great student. So what was the problem?
Well, when he applied to India's top engineering institutes, none of them were prepared to adapt their university entrance exam for a blind student. He tried to convince them for 3 years, and nothing changed.
How terrible. What happened next?
Well, fortunately, Kartik was so exceptional that when he applied to Stanford University in California, they not only offered him a place to study engineering, they even gave him a 5-year scholarship to pay for all his course expenses.
That's fantastic.
It is. If only every student had the chance to study what they want, not just someone as gifted as Kartik.
I entirely agree. Nicola, thank you very much for being on the programme.
Unit 4. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2. A.
In this graph, we can see the percentage of students in England, Wales and Northern Ireland who have chosen to study STEM subjects over a 10-year period from 2008 to 2018. In the majority of subjects, we can see the percentage has risen slightly. There are 2 exceptions to this. The only subject to register a drop is ICT, which has fallen from nearly 2% in 2008 to just under 1% 10 years later. The subject with the most significant rise is maths, which reached a high of 12% in 2018, an increase of 4% compared to 2008.
B.
This bar chart shows the difference between boys and girls in Ireland when it comes to choosing STEM subjects to study at university. In 2 areas, we can see a considerable difference between male and female students, with a large number of boys choosing to study technology or engineering. There is a smaller difference when it comes to maths, with slightly more boys applying than girls. However, the situation is reversed for sciences. Here, a small majority of student applicants are female.
C.
This chart shows us what percentage of female students are studying different STEM subjects at university in the UK. Approximately 1 in 4 female STEM students opted for life sciences. 19% opted for engineering, and roughly the same proportion chose physical sciences. 12% of female STEM students chose mathematics and computer sciences, respectively. A slightly smaller proportion, 11%, chose to study pharmaceutical sciences, and 2% chose other STEM subjects.
Unit 4. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4. 1,
1 in 3.
2,
Just under half.
Unit 4. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1,
A proportion of.
2,
2 out of 3.
3,
5 times as many.
4,
A rise in.
5.
Reach a high.
Unit 5. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. A different type of prison.
Sending criminals to prison has 4 main objectives: punishment, removing the opportunity to commit further crimes, deterrent, trying to prevent crime through the threat of prison, and rehabilitation. But how successful is this? One key way to assess the effectiveness of the prison system is to look at the percentage of prisoners who will go on to commit another crime after they have been released, and how quickly they do this, compared to those who commit a one-off offence. In the US, Bureau of Justice Statistics figures show that 68% of ex-prisoners will re-offend. And, according to a report by the BBC, in Britain, half of prisoners will have gone back to crime within just 1 year. Yet, in some Scandinavian countries, the level is as low as 25%, even after 5 years. So, how are prisons different in Scandinavia, and what are they doing right? The Norwegian system was not always such a good example. Back in the 1980s, prisons were more traditional and more focused on punishment, with 60 to 70% of prisoners re-offending. But, according to the BBC report, in the 1990s, the Norwegian government decided to try something different. They introduced substantial changes to prisons and altered the focus of prisons from punishment to rehabilitation. One important difference is in the relationship between guards and inmates. Guards in Sweden and Norway are trained to form relationships with prisoners, with a focus on talking and improving motivation. They even do sports and leisure activities together. In this way, prison staff can quickly see problems developing and avoid violence. The objective is to make prisons feel safe. This is in stark contrast to the violent conditions in some other countries, including the US. It also means that disorderly conduct and violence directed towards prison officers is far less common than in other countries. In Norway, aggression towards guards is rare, while the BBC report indicates that in the UK in 2018 there were over 10,000 assaults on staff, of which nearly 1,000 were considered serious. In Österåker prison near Stockholm, staff are trained in martial arts and carry personal alarms and non-lethal weapons, but there are no guns in the prison. Significantly, there is a dramatic difference in the ratio of staff to prisoners. In Swedish prisons, there is often one officer for every prisoner, while in some prisons in the US, the ratio is as low as 1 to 23. Interestingly, there was also a decision to increase the proportion of female officers in male prisons, so as to decrease tensions in the prisons and teach prisoners more respect towards women. In some Norwegian prisons, almost half the staff are female. Training is also of vital importance. The more skills prison officers have, the better they will be able to do their jobs, both in terms of helping prisoners and managing situations in the prison before they get out of hand. In Norway, officers also need to be fluent in English to be able to work effectively with migrant prisoners. They study social work and law, as well as self-defence, and it takes between 2 and 3 years to train an officer. By contrast, in the UK, training lasts just 12 weeks and is inevitably limited to issues like control of violence. Even the vocabulary has changed. In Sweden, prisoners are called clients. This may seem a small detail, but it reflects an emphasis on caring and helping prisoners change their lives, rather than punishment. As one Norwegian prison governor remarked, the punishment is not having your freedom, and should not be the conditions in the prisons themselves. The prisons even look different. In Österåker prison, most inmates have their own private room with a shared kitchen. And in one Norwegian prison, prisoners' cells contain a fridge and a TV, and have forest views to help prisoners stay in contact with nature. All prisoners work and are encouraged to study, and many improve their qualifications while in prison. Some critics say that these luxuries are out of place and that prisons of this type will no longer act as a deterrent. But other people believe that if we treat inmates like animals in prison, then we will release animals onto our streets. Reintegration into society is a complex process, but in Scandinavia this is carefully supervised to ensure ex-prisoners are supported during the transition. All this does not come cheap, and a place in a Scandinavian prison costs up to double the cost of one in Britain. But experts insist that the long-term benefit to society of reducing the costs of crime, policing, and the court system, and increasing employment actually make this a more cost-effective solution overall.
Unit 5. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Good afternoon and welcome to Family Matters. I'm Natasha Gordon-Smith. Today, in response to a request from a number of our listeners, we're going to tackle a very controversial topic. Should parents track their teens? Now, one thing that isn't a problem anymore is actually having the ability to do this. You can now download an app or sign up to an online service in order to monitor your teenager's activity online, read their text messages, and see which websites they're visiting. You can also restrict the amount of screen time they have. But, in addition to this, and this is the issue I want to look at more closely in today's programme, some apps allow you to access a person's GPS tracking on their phone to see where they are and where they've been. For some parents of teens, this might seem like a great idea. For others, it's a complete invasion of personal freedom. But this is a reality which is not going to disappear, and it's already popular. According to a study by the Pew Research Centre, 16% of parents with 13 to 17-year-olds in the USA admit that they track their teenagers, and that number will have increased by the end of the decade. I'm joined in the studio today by Conrad Williams, Vice President of the National Parents Alliance, and Denise Palmer, psychologist and family therapist. Conrad, Denise, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Conrad, if I can turn to you first, I know your organisation is very much in favour of teen tracking. Could you tell us a little bit about why that is?
Thank you, Natasha. Well, I think for many parents it's obvious. The world today is an increasingly dangerous place. Young people seem to grow up much faster now than they did in the past, and that means that they end up in situations which can potentially be very risky. And while teenagers like to think that they're very grown up and can manage any situation, that's simply not true.
OK, Denise, what's your view on this?
Well, Natasha, learning to make mistakes is an essential part of growing up. We all had to do it when we were adolescents, and it's important to give teenagers the chance to do this. In fact, not giving them those opportunities can lead to young adults who are over-dependent on their parents and who aren't capable of distinguishing normal situations from dangerous ones. And this is very difficult for some parents to accept.
Conrad, what do you think about this?
Well, as a father of 2 teenagers, I totally agree that young people need a chance to make mistakes, but I also know that having a tracking app means I feel more relaxed about letting them take risks because I know that at the end of the day, I will be able to locate them if I need to.
Denise, don't you think Conrad has a point here?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I really see this as an attack on personal freedom. Relationships between teenagers and their parents are often complex in any case, so it's very important that they are based on trust, not fear or suspicion. If a teenager discovers that their parents have been following their GPS and tracking their movements, it could really damage their relationship.
OK, but you're talking about a case in which the teens don't know that their parents are tracking them. Surely the situation would be different if the parents were open about the situation and told their teens.
I'm not sure that it would. According to the New York Times, research has shown that teenagers who know their parents are tracking them often develop some interesting counteractions.
What do you mean?
Well, if they know that their parents are tracking their GPS, some teens will deliberately leave their phone at home or at a friend's house so they can't be located.
Sorry, but I simply must interrupt you there. I feel as though we're missing the point here. The relationship between parents and their children is based on many different factors, and I agree that trust is one of them. But surely the most important thing is that our teenagers are safe. Personally, I could never forgive myself if something bad happened to my son or daughter, which I could have prevented by simply installing an app.
I totally understand. But the chances of that happening are really very small. It's important that we keep our anxiety in proportion to the actual risk. And frankly, I feel that there are more risks involved if we bring the surveillance society into our family relationships.
I really must.
Conrad, Denise, I'm afraid that's all we have time for.
Unit 5. Developing Speaking. Exercises 1 and 2.
First of all, I'd like to point out that while I wish fines weren't necessary, it seems there are some library users who only act in a responsible way and return their books on time or even ahead of the due date when they face the threat of a fine. So I definitely think that a system of fines acts as a deterrent.
That's an interesting point, but I have read research that indicates the opposite. For example, according to professional service firm RSM, the City of Sydney Council in Australia did some experiments where they removed the fines for a period of time. And in fact, more people returned books during that period than when fines were issued. Not only that, but it seems illogical to me to use the time of library staff to administer and collect fines.
That may be true, but the money collected in fines is also an important source of income for libraries. In today's digital age, it's increasingly difficult for libraries to continue functioning. Their resources are always being reduced by governments and town councils. So I don't think we should cut another source of funds.
I'm pretty sure from what I've read that the amount of money generated by fines is really quite small. But for me, there's a more important matter here. I strongly believe that one of the purposes of libraries is to provide a welcoming public space. I don't think it's very welcoming to fine people who use them.
I agree up to a point. But the fact of the matter is that libraries have limited money for new stock. If they lend, say, 20 copies of a new book that lots of people want to read, and only 5 of those people return their books on time, then you can't deny that the other 15 people are being very selfish by keeping their copies past the deadline and preventing other readers from having the opportunity to borrow them.
I see what you mean. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that libraries are one of the last few public places where everyone can access education for free. Many people who use public libraries lack the resources to buy books. So it's important that the threat of having to pay a fine doesn't put people off using libraries.
I couldn't agree with you more, which is why it's important that everyone has the opportunity to borrow the books they want. And if fines help to achieve that, then there's no doubt in my mind that fines are a good thing. To put it simply, if you want to be able to use a wonderful public resource without cost and without paying any fines, then all you have to do is follow the same rules as every other user.
Unit 5. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1.
Let's start by
2.
I take your point.
3.
I'd like to begin.
Unit 5. Developing Speaking. Exercise 7. 1.
That may be true.
2.
I strongly believe.
3.
You can't deny.
4.
I see what you mean.
5.
I'm pretty sure.
6.
In my view.
Unit 6. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. Is van life for you?
In the past few years, converting a van and using it to live and travel in has become increasingly popular worldwide. For some people, van life is a permanent choice and home is where you park it. For others, it's a part-time holiday option. To find out more, we talked to 3 people with different views on the subject.
Marie O'Connor, 42.
I've been living in my van for about 10 years now, and for me, it's a way of life. My van's quite old. I bought it from my uncle and I did the conversion myself, but I didn't want to spend a lot of money, so I pretty much only used reclaimed materials I had lying around at home or was given. I only spent a couple of £100 on doing it up. Inside, well, it's not exactly luxurious, but it's fine for me. I didn't decide to live in a van in order to have the same home that I used to when I lived in a flat. I have a simple bed and I keep my things in boxes underneath. I find the name van life a bit ridiculous. It just sounds like some sort of marketing gimmick to me. I decided to live in a van because I was fed up with my previous life. You know, like in that question, do you live to work or work to live? Before, my life was all about work and earning money and having stuff, but I wasn't happy. So I decided to take control of things. Now, I don't have a boss and I'm free to do what I want. I live very cheaply, but if I need money, I go somewhere and work for a few weeks. I know when farmers will need extra workers, and I have a few regular places I head to each year. A friend once asked me if I missed my old life. That's easy, not a bit.
Hannah Semple, 33.
My husband Mark and I are both lawyers. We have high-powered jobs in the city, which mean we earn well and can afford a luxury apartment overlooking the Thames. But a few years ago, Mark had a serious illness, and I think that made us rethink our work-life balance. He's better now, but we're trying to make sure we enjoy life as well as work. After reading an article about van life, we decided to buy a fully furnished motorhome. We probably spent another £5,000 on new kitchen equipment and having running water, a power shower and a new fridge installed. We use the van at weekends and for holidays. Last year, we both took 2 months off work to do a longer trip in Tuscany. It was wonderful to sit and enjoy the views in the evening after a lovely meal, knowing that our bed was just a few metres away. Our friends joke that we've joined the hippies, but for us, it's been a great way to slow things down and make sure we get the benefits of all our hard work.
Max Stendhal, 24.
My girlfriend, Poppy, was always reading blogs about van life, so once I'd finished uni, I promised we would have a go. We did the van conversion ourselves, and it took nearly a year because we were both working at the time. We watched a lot of videos online and got advice from friends who had their own vans. We put a lot of work into the design, but we're very pleased with how it's turned out. It's simple, but I think we've made good use of the space. Our initial plan was to use the van as a cheap way to take a few years out and see the world. Neither of us wanted to get stuck in a 9-to-5 job. We both love the freedom the van gives us to travel or move on when we want, and we've met some great people. We both love surfing and snowboarding, so it's also been a good way to move about and do sport. But it's much more than just a way to get around. We started posting on Instagram while we were doing the conversion, and our account soon became really popular with lots of followers. Once we started travelling, we started our YouTube channel, and now we have thousands of subscribers. I never thought I'd end up being a YouTuber, but it means we can afford to continue living our life on the road.
Unit 6. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Not another advert about Black Friday. I hate the whole idea. I'm so fed up with it.
Why? Surely it's a good opportunity to pick up some great offers or buy presents ahead of time.
No, it's just another excuse to get us to buy stuff. A few years ago, no one needed a special day to go crazy and spend. Now, for some people, it's like the highlight of their year. I think it's horrible. I make a point of never buying anything on Black Friday, but I wish there was something else I could do to protest against it.
Well, it's not really a protest as such, but in Spain, we have this great thing called Volunteer Express.
Volunteer Express? What's that?
Well, I guess it's like an alternative to Black Friday. It's perfect for people like you, Harry.
Why? What is it?
So, the idea is that on one day each year, the same day as Black Friday, they aim to collect as much money as possible to help homeless people.
OK, so like a day for donations instead of spending money. That sounds good.
No, but it's more than that. It's not just about the money.
How do you mean?
Well, they do everything from start to finish on just one day. At 9 in the morning, they send out an email and people start donating. You can only donate on that day between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Right, and then they announce how much money they've got and give it to an NGO.
No. Listen, it's a bit different from other charity campaigns. At 6 p.m, they work out how much money they've managed to collect and then they go shopping.
Shopping? What for?
Well, they have an arrangement with a big shopping chain for outdoor goods, and they buy lots of things that are useful for homeless people, like clothes, sleeping bags and so on.
OK, then what?
After that, they take all the stuff to a school or somewhere where there are volunteers waiting. Then they make up individual packs like a kit for each person to receive.
So do they give those to a homeless charity?
No, the whole thing is much more direct than that. Once the packs are made at about 9:30, volunteers take them and drive round Madrid and give them out directly to people who are living on the street. The volunteers also stop and talk to the people, maybe take them some soup or coffee to help them warm up. My cousins have taken part the last 2 years. They say it really brought it home to them how important a bit of human contact is.
That's so cool. I love the fact that it's such a direct, hands-on way of helping. How did it all start?
Well, it all started back in February 2012, when there was a really cold winter. You know, one of those when they say the wind has come in from Siberia or whatever. Anyway, a lot of people were worried about how homeless people would survive out on the streets in cold conditions. So, this man called Miguel Navarro Rubio Pool decided to do something about it. He contacted all his friends to get them to collect money so they could buy things and give them to homeless people. After it was all over, he sent an email to everyone who'd taken part to let them know how much money they'd raised and what had been done with it.
That's good. I mean, a lot of the time when people donate money, I wonder how much actually gets to the people it's for. You know, how much gets lost with administrative costs, advertising and so on.
Yes, well, Miguel is very concerned that it should all be super transparent. Each year, 1 week after the event takes place, he sends out full details of the money raised, kits bought and so on.
Hang on a minute. You said it started in February, but Black Friday's in November.
Yes, when it started it was just a one-off, like I said, to do something to help because of the extremely cold weather we had. I don't think at that point they knew it would become a regular thing, but I think a lot of people feel like Harry and were looking for an alternative to Black Friday, so they changed it to November.
So does this just happen in Madrid?
No, it's now spread to 33 different cities.
Wow, that's amazing.
Isn't it? My cousins told me that last year they raised over €140,000 across Spain in just 9 hours. You know, just by ordinary people having heard about the campaign and forwarding the email to their friends.
Any idea how many people they could help with that amount of money?
I think it was about 1,300.
Was it? Well, that's fantastic.
Yes, so cool.
Unit 6. Developing Speaking. Exercises 2 and 4.
For me, there's no question about it. I think the most important reason is the variety of things on offer. Whether you're into museums or live music, or going out to cafes and restaurants, there are so many things to choose from. What's also true is that there are more opportunities to work and study. And with a great network of buses and metro, it's also so easy to get from one place to another. I think I'd be really bored living in the country. I'd choose to live in a city any day.
What do you think, Borja?
I don't know. It's true that the country doesn't offer so many cultural opportunities, but when you say variety of things on offer, I think it depends what type of things you're into. Not everyone wants to go clubbing or to spend their free time visiting exhibitions. Some people prefer to spend their free time out in nature, enjoying a walk in the mountains or watching birds. You seem to suggest that there aren't as many job opportunities in the country, but I'm not sure that's true. You just mentioned transport too. I agree with you when you say that it's easier to get around in the city, thanks to the public transport system. But what's also true is that the pace of city life means people are always rushing from one place to another, and that makes them a lot more stressed than in the country.
Unit 6. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
As you said, it's a question of priorities.
2.
It's true that there are lots of reasons to feel positive.
Unit 6. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1.
There are so many things to choose from.
2.
It's also so easy to get from one place to another.
3.
Your opinion is just as important as theirs.
4.
You seem to suggest you prefer to shop online for clothes.
Unit 6. Developing speaking. Exercise 8.
For me, there are several advantages involved in living in a flat. For one thing, you don't have the trouble of looking after a garden. If you're lucky, there may be some shared open spaces for all the residents and somebody to maintain them. Your home is also more compact, so you're probably less likely to accumulate a lot of things you don't need. I think it's also a lot safer because it's more difficult for thieves or burglars to break in than if you live in a house. It's also easier to get to know your neighbours, as you will see them on the stairs or in the lift, and this will mean you have people to help you if you need it. And if you're lucky enough to live on an upper floor, you might also be able to enjoy some great views.
Unit 7. Vocabulary in context and reading. Exercise 5. Advertising. What's the story?
Adverts are everywhere. On the street, on public transport, in the park, on TV, on the radio, on the internet, in magazines, in newspapers. You can even get adverts on the soles of people's shoes. We can't escape them. Our every conscious moment seems to be pervaded by somebody trying to sell us something. Who knows, maybe one day advertisers will find a way to project their commercials into our dreams, and then the intrusion into every aspect of our lives will be complete. With exposure to so many adverts, executives have their work cut out trying to make their ads stand out from the crowd. Take TV commercials, for example. Sometimes it feels like the commercial break is actually longer than the programme it's supposedly giving you a break from. But every so often, an advert comes along which actually grabs your attention more than the film you were watching. Such adverts can become a global phenomenon and can be stuck in the public consciousness for years to come. A dream scenario for advertising executives and their products. So, what's the key to good advertising? Well, many in the advertising industry work to a basic set of principles which they believe make a successful advert. The AIDA model was first developed in 1898 and sets out the elements an advert should ideally contain in order to grab the public's attention, convey a message about the brand, and ultimately convince the consumer to buy the product. AIDA is an acronym of the words attention, interest, desire, and action. The theory goes that a truly successful advertising campaign, be it print, TV, or online, should contain all of these elements. Firstly, you grab the attention of your customer, then you maintain their interest, next you create a desire for the product, and then finally you provide a call to action. In other words, you provide the consumer with the motivation and means by which to buy the product. These supposed basic principles of advertising, or variations on them, have formed the basis of advertising for generations. Modern advertising, though, has seen ad companies begin to move away from this template in an ever-increasing desire to be original and appeal to contemporary consumers. One approach, which influences many modern-day TV adverts, is the storytelling advertisement. Storytelling adverts are much more subtle than the hard sell strategy which typical adverts might employ. They take a show rather than a tell approach to selling their products. Rather than overwhelming the consumer with a product's selling points, storytelling adverts show the viewer through a narrative how the product can affect their lives. The aim of these adverts is to create an emotional connection between the consumer and the product. They do this by showing characters experiencing thoughts and feelings which the viewer can relate to. Whether it be a dog food advert featuring the beloved family pet who saves the life of its owner, or the delivery service commercial about the family who sends their son his favourite food at university. These adverts speak to us on a human level. The emotional experience we have makes us less aware and less resistant to the real intent of the advert, which is to get us to buy the product. These narrative-based adverts are also thought to be effective because it has long been believed that people remember information more effectively when it is delivered through a story rather than simply as a list of facts. Love, humour, happiness, and even anger are utilised in modern storytelling advertising. But at the heart of it all is the personalisation, which speaks to us all so profoundly. What does it mean to me? How does it make me feel? Companies play on this personalisation and use it to full effect in their marketing campaigns. Remember a well-known soft drinks company advertising campaign when you could buy the can with your name on the label? The message was clear. This product has your name on it. This brand belongs to you. Whatever the approach advertisers take in the future to selling their products, one thing is for sure. Adverts are here to stay, and advertisers will come up with ever more creative ways to manipulate us into buying their products.
Unit 7. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Today on Making Your Mark, we're talking to Lucille Foster, head of an award-winning advertising agency that is known for its creativity and innovation. Lucille, it's been said that an American entrepreneur was one of your inspirations to try something a little different. Can you tell us about him?
Well, his name was originally Jason Sadler and is now Jason Zook, but that may change. He's quite extraordinary. Each of the methods he's used for advertising has been innovative and unique. None have been traditional. In fact, the reason his name has changed is that in 2012, he set up a website, Buy My Last Name, where he auctioned his surname Sadler and agreed to change his surname to the name of the highest bidder.
And he got a bidder.
Yes. 25 companies bid in the auction, actually. And in the end, the company Headsets.com bought the rights for a year for the sum of $45,500.
Presumably, Headsets.com sell headsets, right? So, what exactly did they get for their money?
Yes, they're a San Francisco-based company, and they specialize in phone headsets for telemarketing and offices. After the auction, Jason Sadler legally changed his name to JasonHeadsets.com. The auction hit the headlines, and after he'd changed his name, Jason blogged about the company. Their investment paid off because they generated around $250,000 in new sales and over $6 million in media coverage.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes. After the year with Headsets.com was up, Jason then auctioned his surname again, and 2 entrepreneurs who created a free surfing app won. They wanted people to know about their product, which gives users access to surf reports about top surfing areas, weather forecasts, and travel resources in 68 countries. And after the year was over, Jason changed his surname again, this time to Jason Zook. He chose the surname after his great-grandfather, Roy Zook, who he admired.
So that wasn't a commercial decision?
No, a personal choice.
Selling your surname's a pretty unusual form of advertising, isn't it? Why do you think it was so successful?
By the time he first sold his surname in 2012, Jason had already built up a reputation for using social media and blogging to advertise a huge variety of products. In 2009, he had set up his innovative company, I Wear Your Shirt. Though he had a good 9-to-5 job, he hated the monotony of office life. At the time, people were asking him about social media, something which he had no experience in, and he realized that here was an opportunity to do something different.
Right. So Sadler came up with an interactive way for companies to advertise using T-shirts with company logos on them and social media.
Yes, it was very simple but extremely effective. He sold the advertising on a day-to-day basis. Every day, he would photograph himself in a T-shirt with the logo of the company that had bought advertising for that day. Then, he'd blog about the company or their products and make videos to post online.
Presumably, people weren't paying thousands of dollars for this advertising.
No, it's no surprise that Sadler came up with a very ingenious pricing policy, which corresponded with the calendar day the company chose to advertise on. In a normal year, there are 365 days. So, advertising on the 1st of January cost only $1. And on the 2nd of January, it cost $2. It cost $3 on the 3rd of January, and so on, going all the way up to $365 on the 31st of December. Sadler spent a lot of time emailing people and blogging about his endorsement idea, and in just 6 months, the whole year had sold out. In his first year of business, he made $70,000, which is pretty impressive.
And this incremental pricing system worked well.
Definitely. It was a good strategy for a startup company. Paying a few dollars for a day's advertising early in the year was pretty inexpensive, and none of the companies had to pay more than $365 for a day's advertising, which is pretty low considering some companies' budgets. And word of mouth meant the company got new contacts, as well as getting them through Twitter and the press. 4 years down the line, Sadler was employing 4 other people to wear T-shirts and blog about the companies. And his business, I Wear Your Shirt, was reported to be bringing in an annual turnover of $500,000. He had some pretty major clients, too, including Starbucks and Pizza Hut.
And did he still follow the same pricing model?
Yes. But by 2010, he was charging $5 on the 1st of January, $10 on the 2nd of January, $15 on the 3rd of January, and so on.
So his employees must be good at blogging and using social media.
Yes, he used social media to find them. All potential employees had to make a video CV, which people then voted for on YouTube. Again, it was great publicity for the company.
So does the company still exist?
Well, by 2013, things had changed. By then, a large number of companies had their own online presence, and there was less demand. Sadler decided that I Wear Your Shirt had run its course, and in May that year, he shut the company down and moved on to other projects like By My Last Name.
I can see why his methods might inspire you. So, after the break, Lucille Foster will be telling us about her award-winning campaign. Join us then.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercises 2 and 3.
Now, I'd like you to talk about something together for about 2 minutes. Here are some different places where people buy and a question for you to discuss. Talk to each other about the advantages and disadvantages of each place.
OK, shall we start with the hypermarket? What do you think about that?
For me, I really don't think it's a good place to buy them. I mean, I don't think the quality is going to be very good. And I think they store things for a long time, so I don't think they'd be very fresh. I guess some people might think it's convenient to do all your shopping in one place. You know, maybe just once a week. But it wouldn't be my first choice.
Yes, I agree. I also wouldn't feel happy doing that kind of shopping online. I think it's important to see what you're buying and even be able to touch and smell it. Especially for fresh produce like tomatoes and lettuces or grapes and mangoes. You really wouldn't know what you're getting.
Yes, I see what you mean. But there are also some great options to buy online direct from regional farms. And, of course, another advantage of buying online is that it would be more convenient to have it delivered, particularly for elderly people, to avoid all that carrying. Don't you think so?
Yes, that's a good point. But you wouldn't have to carry it so far if you shopped locally.
Absolutely. Let's look at the more local options then. What's your opinion of the local mini supermarket? One good point is that they're often open long hours.
That's true. They're certainly convenient, but I don't think the quality is great, and I also don't think you get a lot of choice.
Yes, you're right. I think you definitely get better variety at the produce market and the specialised local shop.
Yes, the trouble is that while the quality is very good at specialised shops, they can be really quite expensive. But I think local markets are great.
I suppose so. But that depends if they still exist in your area. One problem I can see is that a lot of areas simply don't have a market anymore.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4.
Thank you. Now you have about a minute to decide which two ways of buying are the best options.
OK, so what shall we choose? I don't think we should pick the hypermarket. What about you?
No, it's not going to be the hypermarket or the mini supermarket.
I agree. The quality's not reliable. I think online shopping is good for some people.
OK, so why don't we choose that for one of our options? I think overall it's better than the specialised shops. They're too pricey.
OK, so let's pick online, and then I think the one we both agree on is the produce market, right?
Yes, I think if you've got one near you, then you get a good choice and things tend to be fresh and reasonably priced.
Absolutely.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6.
They're certainly convenient, but I don't think they're cheap.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 7. 1.
They have a good choice, but they don't have good reviews.
2.
You don't have to carry the fruit and vegetables, but you don't get to choose them.
3.
The hotel is close to the beach, but it's far from the city centre.
Unit 7. Developing Speaking. Exercise 9.
I think a good salesperson, someone who is well informed about the product, could probably influence me quite a lot, especially if they can tell me things about the different phones that I didn't know. What about you? OK, let's talk about the recommendation of a friend. If it's someone I trust and who has similar priorities to me, then yes, I think I would listen to them quite a lot. And you? Online reviews? I can't say I take much notice. I mean, I think they're probably written by the companies in order to sell things. I don't really trust them that much. What do you think?
Unit 8. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. A life-changing opportunity.
Gordon Liddell was born in Glasgow, Scotland. As a child, He read about scientists working in distant places and explorers, and he greatly admired his uncle, a climber, but he never dreamt that he himself could do these things. His family wanted him to work in finance or become an engineer, and he started off studying civil engineering at university. However, after a year, he realized it was not for him, and he dropped out to go and work in a bank. 3 years later, he went back to university to study his real passion, zoology. Having graduated, he did a range of jobs and started getting experience in zoological science, especially with seals and seabirds. He found out about the possibility of working with the British Antarctic Survey, BAS, a leading polar research organisation. But when he first contacted them, they said he lacked experience. So he spent the next year helping on various research projects on different Scottish islands. Following this, he was employed as a seabird scientist by the BAS. An opportunity had come up to do work at the Bird Island Research Station. The station is an important centre for research into bird and animal biology, situated in the Antarctic. Sir David Attenborough, the natural historian and broadcaster, who presented the series Life on Earth and the Blue Planet, has described the area, with its population of around 30 million birds and 3 million seals, as having the greatest concentration of marine animals and seabirds on the planet. However, despite the amazing wildlife, life on Bird Island is also very challenging because of the low temperatures and the island's remote location. The station can only be reached by ship, and these only come twice a year. When Gordon was on the island in the early 90s, there was no telephone, internet or television, and very limited electricity. The only communication with the outside world was by radio, and that didn't always work. The cold and the geographical isolation were not the only challenges. During the 7-month winter, there were only 3 scientists on the island. This meant that the people working there had to be able to cope with any emergency situation themselves. Before Gordon left for the South Atlantic, he received special training for this. This included time spent in a hospital learning how to set broken limbs and close wounds with stitches. He also learned emergency dental treatment, including giving anesthetic and taking out teeth. Working in the Antarctic could obviously be very dangerous, and in the years before Gordon arrived, there had been some fatal accidents. He sometimes had to climb to reach the birds, and on one heart-stopping occasion, several thousand tons of rock broke off above him, and he was lucky not to be badly injured. One of his colleagues nearly died from loss of blood following a bite from a seal. Apart from the physical dangers, spending the 7-month Antarctic winter in a small wooden hut with just 2 other people can also be challenging. They slept in bunks in the same room, and initially there was no toilet. They also had very limited free time. It was all very different from life with his family back home in Glasgow. Gordon spent 2.5 years at the station and never had a day off. He spent his working day monitoring small seabirds and also conducting studies of the seal and penguin populations. What free time he and the other staff there had was spent maintaining the station, cooking and cleaning. In the few remaining hours, they used to read, play darts, and once a week watch a film. They would also try to talk to scientists on other research stations in a similar situation. On one occasion, Gordon had a conversation with another group of scientists who were, in fact, directly above him on the International Space Station. What happened next in Gordon's career? Well, having finished his work on Bird Island, he stayed in the South Atlantic for some years, working as an observer on fishing vessels and helping on boats making wildlife films. He later worked for the local government, representing it at international meetings about fishing and tourism, and, on returning to the UK, worked at the University of Dundee on scientific and cultural projects connected with the polar regions. So, how did this life-changing experience change Gordon? I have often thought how lucky I am to have seen and done so many things. I am not sure if I have changed, and I still dream of going to new places. I feel I have made a positive contribution to conservation, but have lived in a time when the planet has suffered terribly. My experiences have taught me that I don't matter, that the individual is very small, but that we have a responsibility to look after the world for the generations to come.
Unit 8. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercise 4. Speaker 1.
I think the thing that worried me most beforehand was being lonely. Though I look like quite an outgoing person, I'm actually a bit shy. I've been abroad several times before, so for me, that wasn't a big concern. And I'd chosen to be with a sporty family, since I thought it made sense to have things in common. But I was worried that my German wouldn't be good enough, and I would have problems communicating. I needn't have worried. My host family were lovely. I was also quite nervous about my first day at my exchange partner's school. But although some of the lessons and how students behaved were a bit different from school in the UK, the people were really quite similar. You know, there were the nerds, the fashion victims, the sporty kids, all the usual types. In general, the differences were quite superficial. The times people eat or how they wash up. The actual people weren't very different at all.
Speaker 2.
When my teacher first suggested it, I really wasn't keen. I mean, I really enjoy my classes and practicing, but for me, well, I think it's a personal thing. I really like playing in groups with other people, but I just don't see myself doing it alone. I think the thing that made me most nervous was the thought of all those people watching. I talked to my teacher about it, as she plays a lot in public, and she gave me this recommendation. Forget about the audience. Don't even look at them. Just focus on what you're doing. You know you've practiced and are well prepared, so just enjoy it and do it for you. It was a great piece of advice. I was still nervous, of course, and as I went up on the stage, my legs were shaking. But once I was up there, well, it was just me and the violin. Since then, I've played alone a few more times, and I always follow the tip she gave me.
Speaker 3.
My family moved house in August, which meant starting in a new town with a new school, new friends and so on. I'm quite a shy person and have always found it hard to make friends, so I really wasn't looking forward to having to start all over again. Anyway, the first day I found myself next to this girl called Fatima. From the outset, she was really friendly and she made me feel at home. She invited me to go out with her mates, and I was on the point of saying no, as I don't normally feel comfortable in groups. But in the end, I said yes and had a much better time than I had expected. Fatima and the other girls were a lot of fun, and we spent the whole evening chatting and telling stories and jokes. Despite feeling shy beforehand, I actually found myself joining in and telling stories about things that had happened to me. I was amazed. On Monday, Fatima told me her friends had had a great time and wanted to go out again. I can't wait to see them again.
Speaker 4.
I thought I was well prepared.
I really did. My school had competed against the other ones several times, and I had been in the audience, and from down there it looked really easy. So I don't think I realised how much you have to work at it. But this was my first time actually on the team. I think there were two problems. Firstly, the competition took place just after the holidays, and I'd been away scuba diving with my family. And, to be honest, I didn't practice at all while we were away. I just put it out of my mind and got on with having fun. And then, when the day came, and I got up and saw all those people watching me from the audience, well, I was far more nervous than I'd expected, and I just forgot everything I was supposed to say. I think if I'd known it better and practiced more, I could have done it a lot better.
Speaker 5.
I've always considered myself a sporty person. I play hockey and compete in the regional league. I love all kinds of sports, from surfing and scuba diving in summer to snowboarding in winter, and I'm always prepared to try something new. The bigger the challenge, the harder I try. So when Tanya asked me to join her and Chris, I didn't think twice. It was a beautiful spot high up in the mountains, but I have to say I found the actual sport really hard. It takes a lot of coordination and concentration, and at first you really don't want to look down. Did I have fun? Not really, at least not that first time. Thinking about it later, I realised that I did enjoy it, but that first time there were other feelings too. And I think that's really positive. It's easy to stick to what you know, but what's the point? I'm glad I took a chance and challenged myself.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercises 2 and 3.
OK, Elena, here are your pictures. They show people in life-changing situations. I'd like you to compare two of the pictures and say what changes people might experience in these situations and what difficulties they could face.
Right, let me see. Well, in this photo, I can see a couple and they're holding a baby. It looks like a newborn baby and they seem to be in the hospital still. It must be a very emotional moment for them. Well, I guess this will really change their lives a lot. What I mean is, on the one hand, it's a wonderful situation, but at the same time, they're going to have to get used to sleepless nights and maybe being at home more. And I suppose they might have some doubts, about how to be good parents. I think having a baby is a huge responsibility. In the other picture, we can see a woman. The thing is, I'm not quite sure what she's doing, but it looks as if she's having some kind of treatment in a hospital. Actually, maybe she's had an accident or an operation. In terms of the changes she could experience, well, that's a good question. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. Okay, well, I guess she might have problems getting around. She might even need a wheelchair. And I imagine she'll have to spend a lot of hours in the gym. The thing is, she'll really need perseverance with the exercises and so on. So, in both photos, the people are going through a big change in their lives, but I think the difference is that the first one is a more joyful change.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercise 4.
I suppose that what I'm saying is...
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
In other words,
2.
well, I guess...
3.
I've never really thought about that before.
4.
That's a good question.
Unit 8. Developing Speaking. Exercise 7.
Here are your pictures. They show people in life-changing situations. I'd like you to compare two of the pictures and say what challenges people might experience in these situations and how each situation could change them.
Unit 9. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. Young Apprentice of the Year.
In recent years, there's been a growing debate about the advantages of serving an apprenticeship as a route into the labour market. Some people believe it is not as good as a purely academic education, but in many countries, such as Germany, this option is very well regarded. Here, we find out about 3 successful young apprentices and the training choices they made. We should point out that these are no ordinary apprentices. Each of them is a winner of the 2020 Apprentice of the Year competition, organised by NEPIC, an association of companies in North East England. As well as supporting the chemical industry, NEPIC is keen to promote learning of STEM subjects in schools and encourage young people to choose a career in the industry.
A. Molly Conroy.
Winner Molly Conroy is a final year apprentice, currently working towards a foundation degree in applied chemistry. As well as studying, Molly has gained experience working in different labs, testing antibiotics and other medication, and becoming an accomplished analyst using numerous laboratory techniques. But why did she choose to become an apprentice? Ever since she learned about how drugs act in the body in biology at college, Molly has been interested in a career in the pharmaceutical industry. She was at college when she found out about the GSK GlaxoSmithKline apprenticeship scheme. Before that, she'd been planning to earn a degree at university and then apply for a job in the industry after graduating. After researching different options online, she discovered the scheme and was attracted to the idea of being able to gain workplace experience at the same time as earning her university degree. Molly has made the most of the opportunities available, leading projects, coordinating teams, and also giving workshops and presentations to promote STEM careers and apprenticeships to school leavers. This means that, along with her knowledge of chemistry, she has also developed other skills like public speaking and leadership. She now helps other apprentices settle into their work, and, on finishing her training, she's looking forward to her continuing career at GSK.
B. Laura Lee.
Working as a microbiologist-technologist at GSK, winner Laura Lee completed her 3-year apprenticeship in the summer of 2019, during which time she had received a phenomenal 5 Global Employee Recognition Awards, a prize handed out to workers for their outstanding contribution. Laura has been involved in adapting new technologies and working to improve and simplify systems to help colleagues to work more effectively and safely. Like Molly, Laura also works to encourage other young people to choose a career in science. She makes visits to schools to promote STEM careers and tell students about the advantages of apprenticeships. She also leads tours of her department for school leavers. Those who meet Laura say she has lots of drive. and her ability to look for new challenges in conjunction with her academic qualifications means she has a very bright future.
C. Ben Gay.
Another winner of the Apprentice of the Year, Ben Gay is a degree-level laboratory technician at the Centre for Process Innovations, CPI, and is also studying biological sciences at Teesside University. Described by his colleagues as a skilled and talented scientist, Ben shows the confidence of someone who has spent more time in the laboratory. However, Ben didn't immediately become an apprentice on leaving school. Before joining CPI, Ben studied biomedical science for 2 years at Newcastle University, but he didn't feel comfortable with the environment. Ben was attracted to the practical side of serving an apprenticeship because it allows you to contextualise what you're learning. Ben found that he learnt a lot more practical skills through his apprenticeship, something that one may miss out on in the lecture theatres of a university, where the focus is more often on theory as opposed to practice. He found his company to be very supportive, both of his academic studies and in helping him discover what he wants to do in the workplace. For Ben, the best thing about being an apprentice is the variety of things you get to do, which he feels is more than at university or college. Although Ben doesn't yet have a long-term plan, he's happy to have so many opportunities ahead. Molly, Laura and Ben's stories highlight that while studying a regular degree course at university might be the most popular higher education choice for the vast majority in the UK, it doesn't necessarily appeal to everyone. Conversely, the apprenticeship route may well not suit others. Molly points out that while an apprenticeship has worked out well for her, her twin sister, Emily, took a different pathway and studies history at university. Higher education, after all, is all down to personal choice.
Unit 9. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Good afternoon and welcome to Mind and Matters, our weekly programme about all things related to the brain and psychology. Now, according to a study published on Inc.com, 67% of millennials feel under extreme pressure to succeed in life. So why do so many people feel the need to be high achievers, whilst others are perfectly happy to stand still and just let life go by without having the urge to excel in their careers? Our topic today is ambition, and I'm joined in the studio by psychologist Nick Sykes. Nick, good morning.
Hi, Angela.
Nick, can you tell us a bit about ambition and its significance in society today?
I certainly can. But firstly, I'd like to go back to something you said just now when you used the expression, let life go by, to describe less ambitious people. I think maybe there's a negative connotation attached to that phrase, unintentional on your part, I'm sure. An implication that those people are in some way wasting life by not constantly pushing themselves to greater levels of success.
I see what you mean. I'm now searching for a more neutral expression.
Well, perhaps simply live life would be a more positive way of looking at those who choose not to let ambition dictate their lives.
Yes, quite.
But it's no surprise that you and many people might instinctively think about ambition in this way. You see, in some ways, a constant drive for progress is a key part of what makes us human. Humans got to be the dominant animal by being competitive and more successful than other animals on the planet. So it's really quite natural that ambition and progress are characteristics that many of us identify with.
Yes, I suppose when you think about it, other animals don't share our ambitious drive, do they?
Not exactly. Humans are always trying to go one step further. Climb the next mountain, explore space, invent new technology. Other animals don't do that. They live to survive, and their lives really haven't changed in any significant way for centuries. A lion still kills its prey the same way now as it did 1,000 years ago. It hasn't consciously changed its behaviour to be more successful, though obviously animal behaviour and physiology have evolved over time.
OK, turning our attention back to humans, then there are different types of ambition, aren't there? It's not always simply about making as much money as possible.
I do think ambition is very personalised. If you ask the question, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time, most people would be able to come up with some kind of answer, and in the vast majority of cases, this would focus primarily on their work and their financial situation. They'd maybe talk about getting a better job, or being promoted, or being able to afford a car or a house. For other people, the focus would perhaps be more on meeting a partner and settling down, having children, or building a larger network of personal relationships.
OK, so progress in their personal life as well as in their career.
Yes, but here's an interesting point. In a study published by Gallup, while only about 15% of Americans see their own success in terms of professional status, 45% of them believe that for society, the appearance of success, status, and thus money, is really important.
So those people feel they should be seen to be moving up in order to be happy?
Right. They need perceived but not actual progress to feel their life is a success. And that motivation often leads them to have ambition, the desire to achieve those things which can in turn lead to the development of less pleasant qualities like becoming very competitive.
And not achieving what you want can lead to dissatisfaction, one imagines.
Absolutely. But in fact, research conducted at the University of Rochester showed that achieving success in things like personal growth and relationships actually brings more long-lasting satisfaction, which is great for people for whom success in life is about being happy with what they have and enjoying that.
So I suppose a key takeaway from all this might be that ambition can be both a good and bad thing?
Ambition can help us develop a sense of purpose and direction. It can make us feel more in control of our lives, and if we're successful, then achieving our goals can lead to great feelings of satisfaction. But in my opinion, our happiness today is too closely linked to certain types of achievement and success. If we listen to the research, it might be better if we spent more time trying to improve ourselves as human beings and grow our personal relationships, instead of constantly seeking money and material possessions.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercises 2 and 4.
Now I'd like you to talk about something together. Here are some different places where people work in teams and a question for you to discuss. Talk to each other about how important teams are in each place.
OK. What do you think about the hospital?
I think teams are really important in that context. I mean, not only do you have the medical personnel, but also all the administrative staff.
Yes, and other staff for cleaning and cooking. I think on the whole, people on those teams work closely together. But I'm not sure how much the different teams mix.
Yes, I agree. Shall we move on to the factory?
OK. I'm not sure how important teams are here. I imagine, to a great extent, each person does their own thing. Obviously, all the things they do contribute to the final product. But in general, I don't think people need to work that closely together in this kind of place.
Yes, you're right. And I think the same is probably true at the advertising agency. I guess each person there would be working on their own project.
I suppose so. But don't you think they would also be working in teams? At least the people working on one particular campaign. I mean, the people who speak directly with the customer would need to pass information on to the creative team.
Yes, I see what you mean. OK, what about the staff on an aeroplane? I think in most cases they have to work pretty closely together.
Yes, I think the team is very important in that kind of workplace, particularly in any kind of emergency. Right, so that just leaves school. What do you think?
Well, broadly speaking, I guess they work pretty closely as a team. You know, people from different subjects would need to discuss the progress of individual students.
And people teaching the same subject would need to coordinate on exams.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5.
Thank you. Now you have about a minute to decide which two teams you think are the most satisfying to work in.
OK, so what do you think? On the whole, I don't think the factory team would be very satisfying. I don't think you would have a lot of contact with other workers.
Yes, I see what you mean. I think the advertising agency would be a satisfying team to work in. I mean, you'd be working together on a creative project with a clear end result.
Yes, you're right. Why don't we choose that as our first? OK, what else?
What do you think about the team on a plane?
I'm not sure. I think, by and large, the teams are different each time they fly, and I'm not sure how much integration there is between, say, the pilots and the cabin staff.
Yes, you've got a point. OK, that leaves the school and the hospital. I think it must be pretty satisfying working in a school.
I suppose so. But I think the idea of the team is maybe more important in a hospital. You know, when all the different specialists come together to help the patient get better. That must be very satisfying.
That makes sense. Let's choose that one.
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1.
Most people,
2.
by and large,
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 7. 1.
in most cases,
2.
I'm not sure,
3.
that's a good point.
4.
What do you think about...
Unit 9. Developing Speaking. Exercise 9.
Let's see. So, by and large, I think an apprenticeship is a great way to combine getting work experience with studying. What about you? I think this depends to a great extent on the person. I guess if you set up your own business, you can learn a lot. But on the other hand, you wouldn't get the opportunity to learn from other people. What do you think? I think there are lots of good reasons for volunteering, but on the whole, I don't think it's a good way to get work experience. And you?
Unit 10. Vocabulary in Context and Reading. Exercise 5. An Introduction to Sign Language.
Which language is used by 500,000 people in the United States, is the fourth most widely used language in the UK, and is celebrated every year on the 23rd of September? The answer is sign language, the language of communication for people who are deaf or suffer hearing impairment. It is thought that there are as many as 70 million people worldwide who communicate using sign language. However, it's important to note that there is no one sign language. The Ethnologue of World Languages lists 150 sign languages, although other estimates claim there are as many as 300. There is also an international sign language, which serves to help speakers from different deaf communities communicate with each other. In several aspects, sign languages have little in common with spoken languages. The first difference concerns how communication takes place. In sign language, people can communicate in two different ways. The first is by using learnt signs to represent different ideas. Each sign combines different elements, such as hand shape, position relative to the body, and movement to convey the message. This is also combined with facial expression and body position. Changing any of these elements will alter the meaning or nuance of the word being signed. Additionally, signers can use gestures for letters of the alphabet to spell out words. Because this takes longer than normal signing, users tend to limit finger spelling to things like names of people or places that don't have their own sign, or as a way to give enhanced clarity or emphasis. Another important difference exists in terms of the different varieties of language. For example, although there are some differences of accent, vocabulary, and even grammar, spoken versions of British and American English have a lot in common, and speakers have few difficulties understanding each other. The same is not true of sign language. The sign language used in the United States is quite different from British Sign Language, BSL, even including the alphabet. In American Sign Language, ASL, for example, you can make the letters with one hand, while in BSL you need to use both. Likewise, different Spanish or Arabic-speaking countries do not share the same sign language and won't be able to understand each other. A third difference concerns the symbols used to represent different things. In spoken English, the connection between the animal which flies, lays eggs, and lives in a nest and the word bird is quite arbitrary. But signs will often reflect visual elements of the thing being described. In ASL, the sign for bird suggests the idea of a bird's beak opening and closing. There are, of course, some similarities between spoken and signed languages. Sign language has the same grammatical elements as spoken language, although the way these elements are combined is different. For one thing, if you say and sign the same sentence in English, the ideas will not be expressed in the same order. In BSL, the first thing to establish is the time frame of the sentence, followed by the topic and the action. For example, in spoken English you would say, "I made some pancakes yesterday," but in BSL it would be more like, "Yesterday pancakes I made." Another similarity is the way children learn. All children are born with a capacity to learn any language, and in this sense, sign language is like any other. If children are exposed to sign language from birth, they will go through the same stages as children who grow up in a spoken language environment. Just as a speaking baby will produce sounds before they produce actual words, so a signing baby will initially make hand movements which are not meaningful, before starting to produce correct individual signs at about 1 year of age. Whether they are speakers or signers, toddlers then progress to combining two elements between 1 and 2 years old. Additionally, while spoken languages have regional accents which help to identify the origin of the speaker, so sign languages also have regional variations. So why don't more of us know sign language? With 11 million people in the UK suffering some kind of hearing loss, that was the question 18-year-old Jade Kilduff asked, having learnt to sign and seen how it helped her brother communicate. She set up a Facebook page to teach people sign language and launched a campaign calling for all schools to teach basic sign language in order to make them more inclusive. Over 100,000 people have signed the petition so far, which means it will be considered for discussion in the UK Parliament. Lyndhurst Primary School is one place that takes this very seriously. Wanting to help integrate 3 children with hearing impairment, the school in Oldham near Manchester introduced weekly lessons in BSL for all students. Perhaps if more schools followed this example, It would help break down barriers and make us all more successful communicators.
Unit 10. Developing vocabulary and listening. Exercises 3 and 4.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. A few years ago, Time Out magazine conducted a study to find the world's most attractive accent. The survey was answered by 15,000 people in 32 cities worldwide, and 17% of respondents agreed that the British English accent was the most attractive, with the French and Italian accent coming second and third. But what is an accent and why is it important? With me in the studio today is linguist Joshua Hill Merton.
Good afternoon, Marcia.
Now, I read somewhere that there are 37 different dialects in the UK. One question many people ask is, what is the difference between an accent and a dialect?
Well, even experts disagree on the definitions, but in principle, an accent is a matter of pronunciation, whereas a dialect affects things like grammar and vocabulary. So a person from Glasgow might say, "Those shoes need cleaned," whereas the standard form across the UK would be, "Those shoes need cleaning." So that difference in grammar is an example of dialect. And a quick example of difference in accent here in the UK, in the south, we might pronounce the place where we wash ourselves as bath, with a long R, but a person from the north of England would pronounce it bath, with a short ah sound.
OK, and why is a person's accent important?
Well, obviously it tells you where a person's from, and in Britain some people use it as a way to determine a person's social class, though this is a gross generalisation, of course.
I see. And do people suffer discrimination because of their accent?
Yes. In fact, research by law firm Peninsula showed that 80% of employers in Britain admit to having made discriminating decisions on the basis of someone's accent. And according to research conducted for TV station ITV, 28% of people in the UK feel they have suffered discrimination because of their accent.
Another issue around accents, which I believe has become more prominent in recent years, is to do with voice recognition software. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
This type of software is often programmed to make out mostly standard American accents, but speakers with other non-standard accents can experience difficulties when trying to use things like smart speakers or virtual assistant technology. The machines sometimes have trouble understanding their commands. That's a real problem as we move into an ever more automated world.
OK, that is interesting. And of course, there's a history of underrepresentation of non-standard accents here in the UK, isn't there?
Yes, indeed. If you go back to the first BBC television broadcast in Britain in 1932, the accent used then, and basically for public broadcasting for the next 50 years or so, was exclusively received pronunciation, or RP, sometimes known as the Queen's English, a so-called upper-class English accent. For years, this was all you would hear on news programmes in Britain, even though it's an accent that only 2% of today's population actually have.
Now, another thing I wanted to ask about is accents in the music industry. I've been a fan of Adele for many years, but I was really surprised when I first heard her in a TV interview.
Her strong London accent, you mean?
Absolutely. It's a lovely accent, but it wasn't what I was expecting at all, as it doesn't come through when she sings her songs.
Right. Well, there has been a tendency, really since the start of pop music, for a lot of British singers to use an American accent when singing. Some people say it's easier to pronounce while singing, but others think it started out as a way to be more popular with a worldwide audience, to become more universal. That trend has really continued, Until, that is, some bands, like Arctic Monkeys, started consciously singing with their own British regional accents. This has brought new accents to a greater audience.
I imagine TV has also helped expose people to a greater range of accents.
It really has, particularly since the advent of streaming services. If you're a fan of the TV series Derry Girls, then you know what a Northern Irish accent sounds like, and one particular series from the UK has brought the Birmingham accent into the international spotlight, although people who come from Birmingham aren't actually too impressed with the actors' accents, apparently, as they don't think they sound authentic, which is quite a common occurrence.
But do the accents we hear on TV influence our own accents?
They certainly can. Probably the most famous example in recent years is Australian question intonation.
What's that?
Well, one characteristic of the Australian accent is that the intonation tends to rise at the end of a sentence, even in an affirmative sentence. So instead of saying, "I'm a professor of linguistics," I would say, "I'm a professor of linguistics."
OK. But what's this got to do with TV?
Well, some people think that the tendency to use this intonation started in Britain with younger people in the late 1980s, and at the time, two of the most popular soap operas in Britain with this age group were the Australian series Neighbours and Home and Away. But others attribute it to California, where linguists identified this speech pattern as early as 1975.
Fascinating. Now, let's move on to something else.
Unit 10. Developing Speaking. Exercises 2 and 3.
In this presentation, I'm going to talk about whether spending a semester or an academic year doing an Erasmus or similar overseas study programme is the best way to learn a foreign language. For me, there's no denying that spending a significant period of time at a foreign university could be a life-changing experience. Many young people look forward to this opportunity, and for the majority of them, it may be the first chance to spend any time away from home. This means that it's an opportunity to learn many different things, from cooking for yourself to managing your money and time. It's also a chance to develop independence and self-reliance. Moving on to the idea that it is also an opportunity to learn a foreign language, I would agree that on the surface, the idea of attending classes in another language and sharing accommodation with students from other countries would seem to present an ideal opportunity to improve your understanding and ability to communicate. But does it really? Whilst it's true that you will learn many things, and that you might also meet local people, in my opinion, there's no guarantee that you will. In my case, I'm from Madrid, and based on the experience of my brother and his friends, I know that there's a very high possibility that you will meet a lot of Spanish speakers during your semester abroad. Obviously, the extent to which you mix with people from your own country is up to you. And clearly, if you're determined to avoid this, then you may be able to. But having said that, given the choice between a conversation that requires effort and one in your own language, many will take the easy option. Even if you are lucky enough to end up in a place where there aren't any other students who speak your language, the chances are that even if you want to learn the language from that country, say Norwegian or Italian, you won't be able to because you will spend all your time using English as a means of international communication. Returning to my first point, it is certainly true that spending time studying abroad is a fantastic experience and an opportunity you should definitely take if you can. However, the fact remains that while some people will learn a language as part of this experience, others most certainly won't.
Unit 10. Developing Speaking. Exercise 5. 1.
Can you tell me about your experiences studying abroad?
2.
It's an opportunity you should take if you can.
Unit 10. Developing Speaking. Exercise 6. 1. A.
He said I wasn't here, but I was.
B.
I was studying in Ghent when I met my wife.
2. A.
Have you ever studied abroad?
B.
I haven't, but my brother and sister have.
3. A.
I haven't been to the US, but I'd like to.
B.
I'm going to study in the US next summer.
4. A.
Phil has got a new phone.
B.
I haven't seen the film, but Jed has.